Welcome to the Analytics Engineering Podcast, featuring conversations with practitioners inventing the future of analytics engineering.
On today's episode, we're going to be hearing from Brittany Bennett. Brittany is the data director at the Sunrise Movement, which is a youth nonprofit dedicated to stopping climate change and creating millions of jobs in the process. What is so unique about Brittany's role as the data director at Sunrise is she spends a whole lot of her time training and investing in her data team. This episode, we're going to talk about training people to learn a new technical skill set, creating space for learning as part of the job's core responsibilities, and how careers in analytics are changing. I highly recommend this episode for managers and data practitioners. As Brittany shares, often coding is the easy part. The harder part is finding the right people who are mission aligned. The manager's responsibility then becomes keeping those people fulfilled and learning in their roles, all while accomplishing more for the business.
Yeah, I don't want to give away one of the biggest surprises in this episode, but let's just say that Sunrise has a different model of how compensation works, like individuals' salaries work, than most of the organizations that certainly I am familiar with and probably our listeners are familiar with too. The reason that that ends up being so interesting for me is that you can't just say, you should continue to work here because we are paying top of market salaries. You have to, as a manager, find all of these different tools to say, here is why this is a compelling place to work. And so I think Brittany has done a tremendous amount of work, much more work than most folks that I'm familiar with in her role, to answer the question, how do I, as a manager, make this position for my direct reports the right thing, the compelling experience for them?
Yeah, it seems like her limitation of not being able to attract people because of salary alone forces her to be extremely thoughtful about building data teams, investing in their future, and also just making it worthwhile for both the nonprofit and for the people who are doing the jobs. So I think this is a really great episode. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Welcome, Brittany. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I always like to start off our episodes asking kind of weird and off-the-wall questions. So here's your heavy hitter. What is the most unusual thing about you as a high schooler? What was the most unusual thing about you as a high schooler?
I think it's no surprise that I didn't get invited to that many parties, but the one cool high school party that I did get invited to was with some other nerds, some chemistry nerds to be exact. And I thought I would be so cool if I rolled up to that party with my mom's college copy of the Merck Index, which is a 1,000-page Bible of all chemical substances. Yeah,
you were prepared.
I was so prepared.
And how did that party go? Was it a rager?
It was a hit. Everyone, I pulled the Merck Index out of my purse, all 10 pounds of it, and we poured over it. Yeah, we were a bunch of nerds.
Nice. Zooming into the future, have you picked up any new hobbies since the beginning of COVID? What are you spending your time on these days?
Yeah, I have stopped drinking since the start of the pandemic. And unfortunately, that was a really good decision. You know, people tell you, get 8 hours of sleep, meditate, don't drink that much. And you're like, why would I do that? And unfortunately, it all works. And so in lieu of that, because I really missed having a nice cocktail, my old manager sent me Good Drinks, which is a recipe book to make really gourmet, nice cocktails. And so I'm like something of a mixologist now these days.
That's awesome. I have let my cocktail prowess atrophy since having 2 kids. There's no time in the day to be anything less than stone cold sober. How about, I was looking at your LinkedIn. It seems like you spent a bunch of time in Denver, but are you now in Pittsburgh? Is that right?
I am in Pittsburgh. I lived in Denver for my first 3 years out of college. And the way I like to say it is, I don't smoke, I don't hike, I don't climb, I don't camp, I don't bike. And so really, what was the point of me being in Denver? I did not fit that vibe whatsoever. And it just so happens that my best friend, my mentor, my chosen family lives here in Pittsburgh. And I called him one day and asked if I could move to be closer to him and help him raise the children that he's about to adopt.
Oh, wow. That's pretty amazing. Not a story you hear every day.
No, the adoption hasn't happened yet. I'm on the edge of my seat, and I'm going to be the world's best aunt to that kid.
Well, congratulations. I think every single other thing that we're going to talk about today is going to be way less significant than that. So that's neat. One of the big backgrounds of your career, and that we'll end up talking about a lot today, is you still work in progressive politics. You've worked in progressive politics for, I think, your entire career. That doesn't happen by accident. It's not like you were just like randomly doing a job search and you stumbled into it. My guess is that if this is something you've been committed to since a pretty young age, there's got to be a story there. What got you down this road?
You have a good insight for story because there is a story there. I was an engineering major in college, and I was an engineering major in college, civil, by the way, because I was a math nerd. I was a science nerd, and I was taught that, engineers are the people who leverage math and science for the benefit of humanity. And I was like, word, cool, I wanted to do that. And so I graduated with a civil engineering degree. And I didn't think I wanted to be like a quote proper civil engineer, but I was young and I didn't know what jobs were out there. I didn't know what the industry would like. I had never heard of like progressive politics or any of this. And I got a job as a transportation engineer. And I spent a year widening highways. And I was like, this ain't it. Like, this is not what I want to be doing. And so I really honestly like struggled for the early part of my career where I was like working these jobs I didn't like, that I wasn't a good fit at some really chaotic environments. And like over the course of that, ran into people who were doing data, but for politics. And I was like, whoa, hold up. Is this that data for good stuff that I've been hearing about? I've been wanting to get into that. And I discovered this world and made it a point. And at the time, I was actually working in fundraising. I was fundraising for progressive organizations. And I said, I want to be in data. Like, I want to do a full 180 pivot. And I did a boot camp, for better or for worse. I really pushed myself, and I really only am where I am now because I got scouted by some friends at Data for Progress who saw something in me and like gave me my first work in the data field and said, hey, like, we think you actually belong here and can do good work.
That's awesome. Everybody has to have that push at some point. Julia, I don't know if you heard what I heard, but there was a little parenthetical there, for better or for worse, related to the boot camp. I didn't anticipate talking about boot camps today, but it's an interesting topic. I have an MBA, and I could say the same parenthetical, like, for better or for worse, I have an MBA. Do you find that added to your story? What's the deal?
I would say most boot camps are oriented around data science and like quickly getting up people in order to do basic data science skills. I feel like the rest of the data industry, analytics engineers, data engineers, analysts, lack the same infrastructure. Like, there aren't boot camps that are designed really to develop you as a data engineer. It's the less sexy of the data professions, and like, we just don't have boot camps. And like, I felt like I learned some valuable things in my boot camp. I also felt like I could have taught them myself if I was motivated enough.
Yeah.
It reminds me, Tristan, of the question you asked me when I was the guest, which was, do you think colleges, everyone will have to go to one? And I actually really like the concept of boot camps because it gives you that sense of learning in an organized structure. People are really familiar with it, but it allows people to be a little bit more adventurous in making career changes or learning something new in a safe space. So I think boot camps are great. I'm excited to see that there's been all these great software engineering boot camps, but also more data boot camps. And we're actually doing an apprenticeship program at DBT Labs, which we're really excited about. We'll probably talk about it a little bit later on in the episode, but boot camps are awesome. So I'm all here for it.
I think you're spot on. It's like almost resume cover for, I don't know what the hell I'm doing right now. That was definitely, my MBA was, certainly there was some good content there, but it was also just like a 2-year placeholder that feels legitimate on your resume to figure your shit out.
I think that's what most people learn. You're always just figuring it out. But so, Brittany, I loved how you described it. Is this that data for good stuff, which is a kind of fun way to categorize what you do? And so you're the data director at Sunrise Movement. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what Sunrise Movement is, and then we'll jump in from there.
Yes. So I'm the data director at Sunrise Movement. Sunrise Movement is a youth climate movement dedicated to passing a Green New Deal and creating millions of good jobs. So we consist of over 500 local volunteer hubs in every single state in the country. And then that is a network of tens of thousands of members. So what we do is we recruit members to our hubs. Then we train them up in the skills needed to organize locally in their community. And then we mobilize them sort of nationally in mass action. And then if I'm the data director of this movement, what is it that I do? And my job is to leverage the insights from data analytics to answer the question, are we winning?
Yeah, I love it. I think sometimes data is too often used as this like fear tactic, right? Like we hear all these stats about COVID. They're usually pretty negative these days, or people feel like you use big numbers to scare people. Are there any stats you're particularly optimistic about or can get people excited about the future that we live in?
Yeah, I can share that between this year and last year, I see a growing number of young people who are increasingly alarmed about climate joining our movements. Like when the fires were happening in the West, I could see a pretty clear increase in the number of actions and activities, the new members coming in from those areas. Same thing with the freeze in Texas. People are joining the Sunrise Movement partly because they're scared of what's happening in their own local communities, and partly because the Sunrise Movement gives them hope that they themselves can take action and make a difference. I also want to call out that my friends over at Data for Progress recently polled that the Green New Deal is popular among voters by a 31-point margin, with 60% of voters supporting a Green New Deal. And when we talk about our political power, so Sunrise for people power, political power, and an alignment of the two, we are seeing growing alignment in power in Congress around a need to pass bold climate policy. And I'm extremely excited to be fighting for a civilian climate corps and a clean electricity standard this summer.
That's awesome. And what I think is so powerful about mission-driven companies is the kinds of people that you can attract. People deeply care about these kinds of problems, and they're drawn to organizations that are trying to make a difference in the world. And so while we could go deep into talking about climate change and talk about that for hours, what I want to talk to you about today is about how you build your team. You write a lot about how do you train young talent, how do you hire them, how do you make them successful, more importantly. And I think you have some really interesting hiring philosophies. You've written about looking for mission alignment first, and then the hard technical skills can come later. Tell us about how you got to that philosophy and how that's been going for your team.
This is such a great question, and one of the primary reasons I enjoy working in my field so much. So among data people in progressive politics, we have this informal saying that organizers make the best data people. And that's because for us, the most important part of a data job is being able to understand how your work affects the bottom line of organizing. Now, domain knowledge is an important part of any data job. Like when you think about data science in the classic triangle, it's like hard skills, domain knowledge, math, and stats. But for us, we sort of take it to an extreme, and I want to explain why. If you've ever spent time knocking doors, making phone calls, or running a training program, you understand that tech is not the limiting factor to success for the causes that we care about. There is only so much that optimized data pipelines, machine learning algorithms, and world-class data analytics can do to really build power on the left. We are not going to hack our way to a better world. We build power through organizing, and that is by having one conversation and then another conversation and then another conversation. So data, like my world, my field, we exist to support organizers. So the skill I'm looking for is, can my data folk work side by side with an organizer, understand what they need, translate what they need into data terms, and then deliver it to them? And with bringing DBT onto our tech stack, most of the hard part of our SQL and analytics work has been done for them. All of our common joins, all of our common reporting. And so my analysts are then left where the SQL they write can be pretty simple, select all from with a where clause. And they are left to do what they do best, which is building dashboards, making data accessible, and setting measurable goals alongside organizers. Simply put, coding is not the most difficult part of our job. Often we can get by with some pretty low hanging fruit with some basic SQL. It's knowing what to measure in the first place.
This is fascinating because I think it was my last issue of the Roundup. I was talking about Ben Stansel's point that is essentially saying that, the technical skills have become center stage for a lot of data roles, but really they're not the hard part of the job. So it's neat that there are more humans saying that these days.
You come from this problem of we can teach you the skills that you need to do your job. That's the easy part for us. The code, understanding SQL, creating the dashboard will just give you that skill set. The harder part to teach is the mission alignment, understanding who your stakeholders are. And if you can't ever have a good conversation of getting to the core problem or being aligned, there's no hope for you to solve their tech or data problem.
You said that your analysts don't do the DBT work. Are you doing that? Is somebody else doing that?
Yeah, so briefly, I will say that I'm the data director and I have built out most of our infrastructure in DBT alongside with some heavy help. And then I have brought up my deputy data director, Vianney Martinez, who has shown extreme talent and she is taking over ownership of the DBT project. And so I feel really great that I've taken a woman who joined my team last March, having never written a line of code in her life. And then as of this year is fully owning our very hectic DBT project and owning all the analytics there.
That's amazing.
That's a great story. How did she get from point A to point B and what was involved?
Yeah, how do you do that? How do you build a better analytics engineer?
Yeah,
I sort of have my own unofficial analytics engineering bootcamp that I send my new team members through. So, first of all, I am really lucky to be able to rely on organizations like Change the Game, Repower, and Arena Academy. These provide basic data trainings for people in the progressive space. And I always send a new hire to one of these programs. I'm like, your first month of your job, you're going to go to this boot camp. You're going to learn SQL. Come back to me when you're done. And then we take things over to GitHub, where I open up a pull request in a playground repo, like a dummy repo, and I give them an example of a real world task to do. This task is usually something around pulling numbers for a training or a call or event we did, where I just can't quite remember the name of the event. And I give them an opportunity to fully flex their SQL skills. And I've designed a series of these exercises where basically it's a fake Slack message or a fake email that I'm writing from the perspective of an organizer. And I give the data person a chance to solve it. And then they write the code, they bring it back to me in the pull request, and we talk through different aspects of the code. When we do left joins, the left table should be first and the right table should be second. Or this is how we do aliases. This is how we write with CTEs. This is how we think about the grain of the table. So I slowly introduce these concepts to them. And we do this all in a PR because I find that it helps them feel like a hacker. Oh, I'm in GitHub. I'm in this PR state. Oh, this is really cool. And I don't actually teach them Git until they're a little bit more settled into their role. I have more advanced analysts on my team that are doing version control, merging code into production. But with my lower ranking analysts who are more on the fly pulling numbers for organizers and making dashboards, Git can come later. We want to start with getting them comfortable, looking at GitHub, knowing where code lives in GitHub, knowing how to read a README, and learning how to do some markdown. I'm also deeply, deeply lucky to have found a consultant, Jason Weiner, that works with my team as a tutor/mentor. So Jason meets one-on-one for up to 1 hour a week with up to 3 of my team members. And the learning is pretty self-directed. So one of my reports meets with Jason and they're like, I'm having this challenge at work. Can you help me solve it? Or I'm working on a script. Can you help me with it? And I also talk with Jason behind the scenes to be like, hey, I kind of want you to work with one of my reports on this skill. I think they could really stand to learn it. And Jason is just incredible and has been sort of this backbone of providing mentorship and technical support to my team. Because when I first came on to Sunrise, I was pretty junior myself and we were building the plane as we were flying it. And it's I was trying to get good at my job. My team was trying to get good at their job. And my solution to that was we're going to hire an outside consultant and y'all are going to work with him. And then finally, I made it very clear that professional development was just as important as the other components of their job, and that I wasn't expecting them to work an 8-hour day in their day and then get back online and write more code. I wanted them to do the work of getting better and practicing Python and practicing SQL on the job. And I that helped them feel like, oh, learning is part of my job. It's okay for me to not know things right now.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because the worst state you can be in is like an employee thinking I'm just a resource, or like I need to produce, and not getting enough time to like up level your skills. Like one of our values at DBT Labs is moving up the stack. And so it's like spending the time to actually make sure that you're up leveling your skill set. So you have to invest in learning and being a builder. I think that's so important, but like sometimes it can be intimidating. Like the first time you learn Git or version control or like open up a terminal, you described it as an exciting feeling that people have of like, oh, I feel like a hacker, I'm a software developer, I'm actually doing the thing, which is great because I think you give them the support network so that they know they can't fail. But how do you create that environment for people that find doing something that they don't know how to do scary?
Yeah, I love this question because I believe at one point or another, whether it was in school, in early childhood, in a relationship, or in the workplace, that we've all learned to feel shame, and we like internalize like such an intense amount of shame around our abilities and like the way that we move in the workplace. And as a manager, I can't control at what point in a person's life they come onto my team. But what I can control is giving them a safe environment. And so I think you're onto something there about the fear of learning something new and the fear of failure. A very specific thing I do with one of my reports is share a failure each. So I share a failure, he shares a failure, because he came to me the other month and he was like, I am so afraid to tell you about the mistakes that I make in my role because I'm afraid you're going to get mad at me. And that is such a super common feeling. Like if you're working with a manager where you're like, I am afraid of my manager's emotional reaction to me saying that I have messed up in some way in my job, no matter what the severity of that is. And so we do this thing called Failure of the Week. And I have opened up about the mistakes that I have made. And I have shown him that even like me as a leader, like I still make mistakes. And I find that people higher up in a hierarchy at an organization, it's easier for them to hide their mistakes. Lower ranking people, their mistakes are usually very clear, like being seen by their manager. And so I am wondering, Tristan and Julia, if y'all want to join me in Failure of the Week and maybe share a failure either recently or maybe from earlier on in your career. And I will go first with something recent, which is to say, one of the first things I ever did on this job was write a script, a very basic data engineering script that brings in all of our self-reported demographic info. And it was like a script that was like hanging on by duct tape and like no testing. Like it was written in a Jupyter notebook and then converted to a Pi file. And it recently started breaking at a very bad time. And I had to spend a week, like a solid week refactoring it. And that was just like lost time that we could have had this script up in production. So I'm wondering if y'all have a failure to offer for Failure of the Week.
I love this. I stepped away from the microphone because I was laughing so hard that I didn't want to. This is like so wonderful. I talk about this a lot internally, and I completely agree that it would be very easy for me to hide a lot of failures, but I try my best not to do that internally. That maybe I'll pull from, I don't think I've actually told Jason this, but when our mutual friend, Jason Gans, I began working with Jason at a prior company of his called GoCanvas. And I was originally brought in as a consultant, and I had to migrate something like 5,000 lines of procedural SQL into DBT. And I might have oversold him on the speed with which I could accomplish that task. It ended up taking 2 full months of the time that I had allocated to that project. And I think I might have been over by a full month there. And I felt bad about that. But the funny thing is that Jason's boss at the time, he was like, I never actually believed you could get it done in a month anyway. I'm actually really pleased with 2 months. And every time I showed up to our check-ins, I felt bad about being behind schedule. And so, yeah, there was a humility involved in that.
I'll go next. I mean, I'm 3 months into a completely new job as a product manager at DBT Labs. I used to be an investor, so I'm constantly learning, but mess up of the week. We are midway through releasing something really exciting, which I won't reveal the surprise yet, but designs changed, which is a big no-no when you're the product manager and engineers have started to write code already. So we are managing our way through how do we get to a good outcome on the design side without needing to rewrite some engineering code.
Yeah, and it's my belief that a lot of people who make it very far in life and who are successful have encountered many mistakes along their path and have been allowed to move through them, have been allowed to feel the full repercussions of their mistakes and move past them. And I feel like sometimes managers don't allow junior folk to feel the full repercussions of their mistakes, but also like we all make mistakes. And the point is to move on and to learn from it.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about once you've built enough trust with your team, like you can give feedback and encourage, and it doesn't feel like bad. It just feels like a growth mindset. I'm giving this feedback so that we can get better as a team, or I need to hear this feedback so that I can do my job better. But it comes from a place of trust and vulnerability and being able to share when you mess up and being okay.
Finally, we have an opportunity to talk about Brené Brown on the Analytics Engineering Podcast. I've been waiting for it for, 6-7 episodes now.
Empathy is so important. Empathy in management is vital. You cannot be a manager if you cannot have empathy for your employees, even if they're underperforming, because like you have to have hope and faith that they can overcome and like meet the bar that you're having them meet. It just may not be on the timeline that you want.
One of the things that I think is so hard about this topic is to say the awkward thing. Not everybody will ultimately end up succeeding. And as a manager, part of your job is to make sure that people are on a path towards success. And there are so many aspects of analytics that like the discovery process in analytics that it's like fundamentally creative. And it's not so well defined where you can sometimes in analytics engineering where you're building a model and you can be pretty confident, aside from the story that I told before where I blew out my deadlines, but like you can reasonably be confident about when you're going to be able to turn around a piece of work. But if you're like fundamentally in search of an insight, it's actually like not that clear how long that will take or if that insight exists at all. And how do you think about performance management of some of these folks who are learning the trade and it's actually like very uncertain, like what does good look like?
Yeah, I mean, I stick to pretty rigorous project management techniques where at the start of every project, we have a project scope sheet where we outline fully what success looks like for a project. So, for example, if someone's working on a training program, it's like you need to have their pre and post surveys drafted. You need to be able to analyze them. Your final report needs to look like this. And then within that, my analysts and engineers are free to make decisions on their own. Like they are fully the owner of their projects. And then when it comes time for me to give them feedback around their work, we first go back to the scoping doc and make sure like, okay, did you actually meet the deliverables that we agreed upon together? And then if that's met, good, the job got done. And then there's always this extra like bit of like professional development that I do where I'm like, okay, your code may have worked. Like your code may have gotten the job done. We're actually going to take some time during this meeting to look at it. And I'm going to give you feedback of how to make it more robust, how to make it better, do it in our style, whatever. So there's kind of like two bars. There's the like, did the organizer do the thing? Like, did you help the organizer with what they wanted you to help with? Boom. We can often always do that. And then it's like, I always have to hold them to the bar of like, are you being a good analytics engineer? And that's just me trying to develop my team and like give them feedback of how, even if they're meeting the bar for like doing the work, they could be meeting the bar for being a great analytics engineer.
Hey everyone. Just dropping in to let you know that the annual Analytics Engineering Conference, Coalesce, is back. We had the first Coalesce last year in December, and it was fantastic. We had 3,000 registrants, tons of presentations, and this year is going to be even bigger. Register for free at coalesce.getdbt.com.
I think one of the common complaints about professionals in data is there aren't as clear career paths defined How do you think about career progression, mentorship, any tips or advice that you've found to be successful for yourself that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, I think that idea is really interesting because, like I said earlier, data science has a myriad of like boot camps and Medium articles and so much infrastructure out there, right? And like I feel like that we're not like data analytics, engineering analytics, like isn't on par with that. And so I know that when I set off to learn data engineering, I was immediately dismayed by the lack of resources or even just in a set of agreed upon, hey, these are the skills you need to know to be a good data engineer. Like I could not find that list anywhere. I really wanted it. So everyone in my team has a mentor. I have Claire Carroll, who I'm absolutely so excited to be working with. And then the rest of my team has Jason Weiner. Everyone in my team has built-in mentorship as part of their job. They are supposed to meet with their mentor. They are supposed to do additional homework. That happens during work hours. And I'm curious with y'all as to who are your mentors?
I have a few mentors from my previous work, actually. Hillary Koppel-McAdams, she's a venture partner at NEA. She's done a lot with me of thinking about how to navigate difficult career decisions and has been a huge advocate of mine. So I always think about her as a positive force in my life.
This is a bad answer. I have a lot of people that I bounce ideas off of, but and this is not to like go turn this into like the psychoanalyzed Tristan, but
let's.
I've not always been great about asking for help throughout my career, and so have not always done the work to cultivate those mentorship relationships. But fortunately, I think there's a lot of people who are invested in our success as a company. And so as we've continued to grow, there's more and more folks have stepped up and become helpful.
For us, I really believe in the power of mentorship. And I believe in mentorship because there aren't as many data engineering, analytics engineering boot camps. It was why I was so excited that y'all released your Foundry program. Because I'm like, oh, that solves some of the problem here. Like, how does knowledge get passed down from more senior analytics engineers to more junior analytics engineers when even the field of analytics engineering is only a few years old or nascent, right? It's like there's this sudden need for analytics engineering, but like the rest of the like educational resource infrastructure hasn't yet caught up to the booming need. And I'm just really excited to see more work that DBT Labs is doing in order to like create the infrastructure to actually train up this talent.
One of the things that I'm really interested in is the career ladder for both data analysts and analytics engineers. There has been, I'm not going to be, we can link it in the show notes. I'm not going to be able to remember the title of the blog post, but on Locally Optimistic, there was some work done around career ladders on this stuff. But that's a brand new concept that there actually is career progression and there's like well-defined roles and seniority and all that stuff. One of the things that you have to come to terms with there, which we as an organization, as we've grown, as we've trained up a lot of our own initially junior talent, is that often means you're going to have to pay people sometimes meaningfully more. And I think that math still ends up working out tremendously well because you might 10x your capabilities over the course of the first couple of years of your career, and double your salary. But I'm curious if you've had to think about that at all. Like, how does compensation scale? How do you do career ladders? All of that stuff.
It's funny that you ask that because I work at an organization that takes a different approach to salary. So we have a flat salary structure at Sunrise where everyone makes between $50K and $80K, and it's needs-based salary. So you choose your own salary. It's a very interesting model. We're in the process of potentially reconsidering that and bargaining with our union. But at the moment, just say, for example, every single person at Sunrise makes the same amount of money and like it's pretty equal. And like, so for us, if I were to promote someone, they would not be making any more money than they were making previously. And so when I think about it, I think about how am I constantly providing new challenges to my team? How am I meeting the career development goals of my team? Like, for example, if I'm working with a report who's like, I really like digital analytics and I want to stay doing this and I want to learn more about it. My response as a manager is, cool, I'm going to connect you with mentors, consultants, experts in the field so that you can learn from them of how to do this job better. We also have a system on my team where everyone has their specialty. I have an analyst that works just with our organizers. I have an analyst that works with our hubs. I have an analyst that works with our digital teams. Even then, we use an intake system for all new projects. And so as new projects come across our plate, like anyone on my team can take a new project if they want to push their skills. Like if I have someone and they're like, I want to learn data engineering, I want to learn how to write better Python, they're more than welcome to grab that intake form that's like a data engineering script, and then I would help them through and help them learn the skills to do it. So I have crafted a team where hopefully people do their job, people like fulfill their core role, people have the ability to explore other kinds of data work within the realm of our organization. They have a mentor that's pushing them technically, and I encourage my team to write about their work and to share about their work and to give talks. So overall, I think that is a healthy work environment for feeling like you are fulfilled in your work.
So one, it's fascinating. I've never heard of you choose your own salary, but I completely understand like why that in the context of Sunrise makes a tremendous amount of sense. As you were talking about that, I was also thinking back on the way that I set that question up, and I think it made me sound like a ultra capitalist trying to like pay people as little as possible. Just to be clear, paying people in data a lot of money makes me really excited, because when I started, that was not possible. My fundamental frustration at the beginning of my career was that I wanted to work in data and there wasn't really much of a career path then. So yeah, I think it's an exciting thing when people can start and continue to do what they love and continue to get paid more for it.
Yeah, that goes back to a little bit what we were talking about, is making sure that both parties are getting what they need out of the relationship. Yes, you need people to do work or to help contribute to whatever your goals are or the mission of the company. But in return, like they're going to get a lot out of it as well. And that's either some skill set or some responsibility or play a role in something they deeply care about. And so constantly making sure that maybe not at every moment, but the scales are balanced such that people feel fulfilled in their work. So we're going to wrap up with our question that we ask all our guests, but looking 10 years out, what do you hope will be true for the data industry?
I think I've said it already, but I'm so excited for DBT Labs Foundry program. I'm also excited for Claire Carroll's Analytics Engineering Club. And I just want to see more of that, but like times 10. I want to see the DBT blog like go off the chain. I want to see y'all like doing presentations and conferences, and like I want to see like more resources or like asynchronous trainings being built to teach people this skill. Yeah, I'm very excited about what's going on, and I think we can do more of it.
Speaking at conferences, are we going to see you in December?
I don't know if I'm speaking yet, but I think you will see me in December.
Well, that's for sure. All right. It would be awesome to make sure that happens.
I was going to say, I hope you don't have to wait 10 years for all these things to become true. But
yeah, it's maybe not a 10-year thing.
More.
I guess I don't know. I work on the scale of the climate crisis. Like we got 4 years. That's where my head is at.
Brittany, if people want to find you online, where should they go?
I have a website, BrittanyBennett.com, and you can find all my related websites from that one website.
Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
The Analytics Engineering Podcast is sponsored by DBT Labs and is hosted by Tristan Handy and myself, Julia Schottenstein. Have comments, questions, or guest suggestions? Email us at podcast@dbtlabs.com. Our producers are Jeff Fox and David Krevitt. If you enjoy the show, please drop a review or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening.